This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Robert, welcome to Tech Talk.
Great, I'm excited to be here.
I can only begin to imagine how busy your day's got to be. I continuously hear buzz about what's going on up in Forsyth County. Obviously, Cumming is growing like crazy, but I think a lot of our listeners will be fascinated to learn some of the insights that may just surprise them a little bit. And that is, number one, let's start out with fastest growing and most affluent county in Georgia. Is that the case still, and why?
It is. I think we are, still one of the fastest growing, communities, and actually not just in Georgia, but in the United States. I think we're still in the top 10. I think technically we're actually number 2 behind Longs County, which is, sort of you're looking at a percentage of growth. But as far as overall, we're growing very rapidly, and it's sort of a good problem to have.
Well, I think it would come to a surprise for a lot of our listeners simply because so much buzz happens about Fulton or even some of the other regions in Savannah as far as what we think is happening. But the reality of the situation is, especially in the area of the tech sector, things are extremely exciting. Go into a little bit about that. Why does the technology sector seem to be kind of attracted to that area? And maybe go into a little bit of particulars about what it looks like.
Sure. Well, one of the things people don't often realize is that, a huge portion of South Forsyth has an Alpharetta zip code. So oftentimes, they think they're still in North Fulton, and in actuality, they're actually in South Forsyth. So that can lead to some confusion at times, but I think it also has some advantages in that Alpharetta has done the city of Alpharetta has done an extremely good job of marketing themselves as a technology hub, not only within the Southeast, but obviously in Metro Atlanta. And a lot of those companies are actually in South Forsyth. And at the same time, even the folks who are working in North Fulton, many of those folks also live in South Forsyth because of the lower property taxes, the quality of the schools, and so forth. So from my perspective, it's, technology companies are continuing to grow, and particularly in South Forsyth. And I think a lot has to do with the schools, the proximity to North Fulton. They still have the Alpharetta zip code, and we have a lower tax base than some of our neighboring communities. So it's a sort of a win-win all the way around.
What are some of the sectors, if not specific companies, that some of our listeners may or may not be aware are located in Forsyth?
Sure. Well, I guess the sectors, that we are, that we have the most concentration of is, I think we, just like a lot of North Fulton we have a lot of fintech companies that are located in our community. Probably the area that's growing the most right at the moment, it seems to be on the healthcare technology, and that could be biotech companies, companies that are just associated with healthcare in general. That seems to be where we've started to gain some serious traction, to the point that we actually hired a new project manager earlier this year to focus on healthcare and technology projects.
Now, recent technology success stories, is there something that we haven't, either we've just read about or are going to learn about as far as what's happening in the technology arena?
Sure. Probably one of our most recent success stories is with a company called Huddle, Inc. Huddle itself is one of those companies many people may not know about, but they are the largest producer of tickets, paper tickets for the high school sporting events, baseball, football, so forth. And it's a win-win because obviously they are able to provide the tickets to, I think, over 10,000 school districts across the nation for free, and then they have advertisers, and that's how they make their money on the back end, and they often will include a coupon on the back side of the ticket and so forth. They acquired a company just a few months ago from Birmingham, Alabama, so that's going to allow them to transition. They'll continue with the paper tickets, but then they'll have a digital ticket. Obviously a lot of younger folks are much more savvy as far as trying to have, your boarding pass on your smartphone and having tickets on your smartphone. And this is going to allow them to continue to serve that market, and that's going to be a great expansion. That's going to add about 25 new technology jobs associated with, that portion of the new portion of their business.
Now, obviously, we jokingly say in so many cases, we talk to a lot of the verticals in terms of sectors of technology, but as you look across the board, it's so difficult because of the dynamics of change. we jokingly say so 20 minutes ago because it seems like everything changes so quickly. Let's talk a little bit about challenges and opportunities. I'm Forsyth County. You're sitting with a background, I think, over 20 years as far as economic development. You've been in a number of locations and seen a lot of the market changes and the evolution over the last several years, last decade or more. What are the biggest challenges facing Forsyth County now?
Sure. Well, we're in a kind of a situation where every community is a little bit different in the community, the mix as far as the companies in the area, the personalities, and so forth. One of the things when people a lot of times they think of traditional economic development, they're thinking of like big box distribution, like the Amazon project or Home Depot. They're thinking of large scale manufacturing, like Kubota or something along those lines. Well, one of the things we have in our community, one, we're not a distribution hub from at least a regional perspective because we don't have interstate access. So the distribution that we do have is typically smaller, focused primarily on either just the Metro Atlanta area or maybe Metro Atlanta and maybe north of Georgia. So it's smaller retail or distribution companies that have a much smaller footprint and focus. So they don't need a 5,000 square foot footprint. They may only need 30 to 50,000 square feet. And that's been sort of really kind of been our bread and butter is a lot of, projects that are focused, on 100,000 square feet or less. And I think that's the positive of that. I think we rode out the recession from 2008 2009 probably better than most communities because we didn't have that. We don't have the numbers of these big large companies that are huge employers in their community. We have lots and lots of small medium sized employers. So I think it kind of allowed us to kind of ride out that storm a little bit more. I guess the negative is we don't necessarily make the big headlines because of a lot of the projects we are dealing with and have announced are on a little bit smaller, medium size. So there may be an existing company that's growing, expanding, and doubling from 15 to 30,000 square feet. It probably may make the local media, but it may not make the Atlanta Business Chronicle, for example. So it's that's sort of the kind of the mix we see. One of the things we have seen as sort of a challenge is rising land costs. A lot of that has to do with the pressure from just the sheer amount of residential growth that's kind of, has increased all demand for land in our community. And that makes us have to work a little bit harder because if, somebody's looking for inexpensive land, there's really no place in Forsyth County for those type of projects. So that also influences the type of projects we see as well, which is not necessarily a bad thing because it means the projects we are seeing are maybe more, technologically sophisticated. They're maybe more capital intensive, and the kind of projects we see are much different than maybe other parts of Georgia. And probably the biggest issue we have, which goes back to our growth right now, is transportation. One of the, issues that happens when you have a lot of residential growth like we're exploding right now is that it takes a while for the transportation improvements to catch up. So you have to have the transportation problems caused by the residential growth before you're able to resolve those issues. The good news is we are actively doing that. We have literally $500 million of projects going on right now, including the widening of 400, which is the biggest. In fact, we're going to be just in the next couple of weeks going to be opening the northbound lane, and that's going to be from 2 to 3 lanes. And then immediately, as soon as that's done, we're going to be starting the southbound lane of 400, and we also will have 2 interchanges under construction, I think in 2017, 2018 as well. So it'll push things a little further north as far as I think what people are interested in looking at in our community. Instead of just South Forsyth, I think folks will start looking further north once those improvements are put in place.
Now, obviously, we've kind of touched on some of those things, but maybe really focus in on, we mentioned challenges. Talk a little bit about what are the opportunities for Forsyth.
Well, I think the opportunities, for us, obviously we have literally one of the best educational systems, not only in Georgia, but really the Southeast. If you look at our, test scores, whether that's the graduation rate, the percentage of our folks who have college graduation or college, degrees, we're not only do well within the state of Georgia, but we rank well nationally when you look at that. And that's sort of what's led to a lot of reason why people want to live here is the good quality education. I think I got off track a little bit. Was there, to follow back on your question again?
Again, opportunities. What we talked about some of the challenges, but
well, I think one of the issues we have, is there's a transition. Is now that we have better transportation going further north, we're already starting to see, at least in my office and the projects we're seeing, an interest. There was a time when really no manufacturing projects really wanted to go above the city of Cumming. The city of Cumming is sort of geographically in the center of our community, so it's basically coming in south. However, with these improvements we have going on right now as we speak, folks are starting to look further north. So I think there's an opportunity for a lot of those more traditional industrial flex-based projects that would have looked south to consider going further north, and that creates an opportunity to go after more office projects that would be more suitable for office as well as technology companies in the southern part of our community. And we have right now several discussions actually with the developers in the southern part of the community to build office space, which we're kind of lacking as of the moment. I know with the new Halcyon development that is under construction right at Exit 12, that's probably one of the largest projects going on anywhere in Metro Atlanta. That's a $370 million mixed-use development. It's not going to be that far from Avalon, so people keep wanting to try to compare it to Avalon. But I think it's going to have its own unique kind of flavor to it, and it's going to be kind of not necessarily apples and oranges, but I think it's going to have its own unique character associated with that. That particular development has plans for 150,000 square feet of office space, and that's going to be really, I think, well received. I think, they had planned primarily for small office suites because they thought that was what the demand would be up in Forsyth County. But I think once they have started receiving some inquiries, they've been very pleasantly surprised that there were actually folks looking for larger blocks of space. That they were not expecting, to the point that they may actually build instead of just kind of small office suites above retail, they're actually actively considering right now building a freestanding, Class A office building. So I think that's the kind of success stories we need to continue to grow the technology sector in the southern part of the county, because you got to have product, and product from an economic development. We got to have buildings, we got to have land, we got to have sites that folks have access to.
Well, you surely, I mentioned earlier about 20 years. I know that your performance has been phenomenal, and you've been involved in having vested over $2.2 billion in capital investments and created over 8,000 jobs in some of the other opportunities where you've led the economic activities of a particular city or county. I guess part of what I'll look at now, is what's the give us a perspective as the number of projects that you are working on now versus the number of projects you were working on, say, a year ago.
Sure. Well, right now, year to date, we have about 55 active projects. Now, we are a little bit different from a lot of communities in that when we do account development, it's not only traditional account development. It's not just strictly manufacturing and distribution. We do deal with retail. We do deal with office projects and headquarters and those sorts of things as well, hotels. But year to date, we were about 55 projects. Looking back at my predecessor in last year, we only had about 35 projects for the total year, so we're significantly higher as far as overall activity. I like to think a little bit that has to do with me being here, but I think a lot of it has to be just in the right place at the right time. I think a lot of folks in particularly North Metro are seeing an increase in overall activity. But I think it's it makes it a challenge at a time when you're juggling so many projects, but at the same time, it's a good problem to have.
Well, needless to say, it's got to be a combination of the right place and the right people to make the chemistry that's going on with Forsyth. There's just no two ways about it. Robert, I know you're busy. I know you're juggling a lot of activities, much success and continued success, but thank you so much for taking time out of what I got to believe is an incredibly hectic and busy schedule to take a few minutes to join us today on Tech Talk.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a great ride so far, and I think that ride will continue for the foreseeable future. Looking forward to it.